This is your end of day market recap for Thursday, October 9th. Once again, a little bit of weakness coming in Thursday. That seems to be a little bit of the trend. We talked about that last week too, where a little bit of a breather, seemed like a little bit of selling pressure, especially the first half of the day. But also another theme that we're seeing, or trend that we're seeing, is that these little shallow dips continue to get bought. I will talk about in this video maybe a couple warning signs that we're seeing in the market. So stay tuned for that. And then also a lot of positives in terms of names that are once again showing momentum. Before I do that, risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. Please read the full risk disclaimer right there. I'm also going to just zoom in here a little bit for you so that you can see the spreadsheet so that you can follow along here. So bonds, there's a 30-year bond auction today, not really that big of a deal. TLT finished down 0.1%. The VIX also finished just positive for the day. You could see that the indices were all down on the day. S&P down 0.33%. Look at the Qs, only down 0.1%. Really kind of came roaring back there at the end of the day. Small caps were a little bit more heavier under pressure. I think at one point they were down about 1% today. But again, the last couple hours of the day, or especially the last hour of the day, these things came marching back. Now, here's where things get a bit interesting. Look at what the dollar is doing. I looked at the dollar yesterday. I kind of held off talking about it, but it's starting to make a pretty good move. So why? So I will go through the chart in that, but also talk about why that could be important. Look at the move in Bitcoin and gold today. I laugh a little bit here because they're both down about the same. I find it interesting that everybody seems like, I just was listening to CNBC, and I like CNBC. There's just some things that you can use for sentiment. I talked about probably yesterday, there's some things that are either helping you or hindering you on social media. CNBC, it's probably a little bit of the same thing. When they really seem to talk about something like a lot, they sometimes it's close to the top and something going on. But I was just listening to them try to come up with like a reason. I don't really have, I can give you my quick thought on why gold, Bitcoin, down about the same. But my thought is, number one, sentiment probably got pretty hot in gold. They mentioned so many times gold yesterday on CNBC. At least, I don't listen to CNBC all day long, but I try to keep it on at certain times of the day. I'll turn it on and turn it off. And they were real. I heard gold mentioned a lot yesterday. So when they start to get a fever pitch, that's a little bit of a sentiment indicator for you. But really, it's also the fact that these are acting as momentum trades, whether it's gold, and people are trying to rationalize, oh, this is what gold should be used for. Or this is what I think gold is used for. Right now, I know that it has been a momentum trade, just like Bitcoin too, just like the overall market too. And they are moving together. I don't have a chart for this, but maybe I'll work on it. There's not, like, it used to be like gold was kind of uncorrelated with equities. I don't think that that's the case anymore. Gold goes up with equities, and it also goes up with Bitcoin. It's just more of just an overall market momentum trade. Now, for those that are trying to seek some diversification and say, oh, I'm holding gold in case things go wrong. I don't think gold is acting that way anymore. I think gold is just running on a momentum trade. So you could agree, disagree. That's my take on it. I will always give you my take on things. So before I get into the charts, I thought it was very interesting to see solar up 3%. I've talked a lot about that clean energy trade has been just on fire. That's the PBW ETF that did tack on another 0.75%. Also, I did notice that some of the aerospace names like KTOS, AVAV, they started to pull back a little bit. I don't know if that's because of the peace talks that's happening in the Middle East, but I just noticed that some of those things have just run and run and run. So, similar to gold. And one of the things that I talk about in this video, these end of day videos, is where the momentum is, where the trends are, where the themes are. I also talk about how overbought some of these areas of the market are. Take a look at how many areas were down pretty decently. Those gold and silver, those things have been, like I said, these things are due for a pullback. Energy just can't seem to get going once again. And again, maybe that's on a little bit of what's going on in the Middle East. China also down pretty decently, down 2.3%. And the home builders are getting run over. That's another down 2.6%. All right, let's go through some charts, and then I'm going to go through some observations for you. So let me replace, get the right screen up here for you. There you go. So as always, I go through these indices just to let you know if anything's changed. That's all that I'm basically monitoring here. I don't really, confession here, I don't trade the indices that much unless there's a nice dip into some support, or we're extended. I talked about that a little bit today, how there was, sometimes they don't set up for really good, day trades. But I thought today there was a little bit of a day trade that you could have played for some safety, and also to buy the dip. But basically where we closed, which is the most important thing, is we still closed above the 5-day moving average. So again, there's no sell signal here, and that's basically, I'm looking for something. Price is my top indicator that I use. And I use indicators to tell me if anything is changing with the price, if there's any changes in trend. Right now we don't have that. We're testing, but we're staying above this 5-day moving average. We're also not way extended anymore. Every time we get a little bit extended away from it, we seem to kind of come back in. But for now, we're holding above. And again, the picture could change very quickly here, because we're only looking at like a 0.5% down, and the 20-day moving average is about 1%, a little bit more than 1% down. So we're really kind of splitting hairs a little bit. But for now, we're not seeing anything that is really kind of changing the course. So I want to go over the 5-minute, just because, to show you how you can use the value areas a little bit to day trade. But clearly there's been more things that the alpha right now is in single stocks. It's not in trading the indices. They're quite dull, where all the action is in the single stocks. I think you probably know that by now if you've been trading a lot recently. But here you go. Like, here's we kind of came all the way down here 1045, and then we rebounded right into the bottom of the value area. Now, I thought today, being that it's Thursday, and Thursday it just seems to be the weakest day of the week, I just didn't think that we were going to break into the value area. So you could have shorted here, like if you wanted a little bit of protection, right? And then at least, like, you had this decision here to take off the short and see if we were going to bounce. Now, we bounced a little bit. Then in the afternoon, we went a little bit weaker. But notice that we're still kind of in this little bit of a pattern here, short term, because this is just for the day. We did not retake any of these levels here, right? We had a nice bounce at the end of the day, but we really didn't take back anything. Tomorrow, the level for the super short term 5-minute chart, the value area for tomorrow, your resistance to watch is 671.30, in case you can't see that on your screen. And then also the top of the value area for the week, we violated that a little bit earlier in the week, but we came right back up, kind of like holding a beach ball underwater. We came right back up, and we came in and tested that again today, and we're still holding. Now, here's where I said, and if you disagree with me about the indices being excited, I would tell you that we haven't gone anywhere. This is now Thursday, 4 days of the week are gone, and we haven't really gone anywhere in this SPY all week long. Here's where we started. Here's where we are right now, right? Nowheresville for the indices. But again, there's a whole bunch of movers that are going on in sectors and in individual names and in individual groups. Here's the Qs, again, looking a bit better, right? They were only down slightly for the day, got down to that 5-day moving average and held quite nicely. 602.61 is your top of the value area, which, that's about 1.3% away. So SPY has less room for error, or downside, I should say, room for error, downside. But here's also the Qs. We tested this earlier in the week. We held nicely, right? When everybody was going, oh my God, the market's going to crash, right? Earlier in the week. And we basically just came into some support and and held pretty nicely. IWM was a little bit more under pressure. But again, that's not, there's nothing really changing here in IWM, right? So all of these things, there's some, if you want the level there, it's 242.96 top of value. But all in all, just going through this and, and we're through 10 minutes here. And, just to kind of tell you that there's nothing really changed here in the indices. Let's talk about some single names. So the rare earths were in fuego today from last night. We know, that we've been seeing a lot of call activity. The name that I talked about last Friday was so I put this specifically in a post from last week. I sent out a trade idea to Substack, but I also obviously talked a lot about it in the TTG trading room. Right, this is USAR. I've already talked a lot about this in these videos this week. Why I thought USAR was going to outperform MP Materials, and it's done that way handsomely. So that has worked really well. No slouch. And by the way, I'm still long MP. I have nothing against MP Materials. I'm long MP Materials in the TTG, in the TTG trend portfolio, but it just seems like it's stuck in the mud, right? Even in a day like this, where they mentioned China is going to be controlling the exports of rare earths and all of these names get going, look at what happened with MP Materials again, right? And that's why I put this trend line in here, just to see if it would get above it. But it's like we're seeing in some stocks, they just have kind of lost a little bit of their upside momentum to them. They just can't hold the day's gains. Still, you're probably still happy, up 2.4% off this if you bought the lows yesterday in MP Materials. But like I said, it's just not acting as well as some of the other names are. So that was USAR that I went over. The other one that I'm long is UAMY. United States Antimony Corporation. Look at this thing go up 14%. So one of the things that I've been kind of hammering home this week in these end of day videos is make sure that you widen your horizons a little bit. Look at some of the other names, right? I'm going to say this point, even though I've said it 3 or 4 times this week. It is great to get to know some names and understand how they trade. But if you're if you only have that tunnel vision and you're only looking at a very slim portion of what's going on in the market, you're going to miss things like this, right? This stock, when MP Materials was at the same price as it was last week, this stock was at 7. This has now gone up about 35-40% since last week. Right, that is a huge move. Right, and that's kind of some of the things that I try, the value that I try to add, and to say, hey, okay, MP Materials is great. I'm holding that long term, but there's better trading opportunities right now. Granted, these things are extended. I'm still holding a small piece of this, and I've got some USAR as well. All right. Another one too that's been acting really well too is NB. Right. This is another one too. Go back to about a week. By the way, none of these, from my standing, have received the stake from the United States. Right. It's all about the rumor that they may. This was another one. You go back a week, it was 650. It's another one that's gone up 20-30%. Right now, I'll just give one quick disclaimer here with some of these things. I don't normally trade stocks that are under 15 bucks, but I've just gravitated towards where they are. I'm adapting to what the market is giving me, and it's showing me just a lot of momentum in some of the names that are under 15 bucks, for instance, right? And a lot of these are catching option activity, and that's the beauty of option activity, right? It's telling us where there's some positioning, right? And this is another one. We saw like heavy calls go up. Like sorry, they weren't. I don't think they were real heavy in this one, but they were repeat calls going into LAES. Right? This is a name that I got into a couple days ago, and I've had to sit through this ugly looking candle because I got in on the, I think it was this, it may have been this day. I believe it was the 7th. So it actually backed up on me quite a bit. But here it is. And it's nice because everybody seems to be talking about, speaking of social media, everybody seems to be talking about this one. So nice to be in this one. And again, this is another one. It's a $5 stock, right? Not usually my cup of tea in terms of trading stocks under 10 bucks. But hey, I'm not going to ignore where there's really hot momentum in this market right now. All right, let's go on and let's talk about outside of the rare earths and small cap semis. Um, let's talk a little bit about let's talk about ARM. Right, ARM is one that I haven't really traded too much. This is another one that I've been kind of just taking some clues from option activity, because, and by the way, when we're in a bull market, option activity helps a lot, especially when we're in a raging bull market. Option activity helps tremendously when things kind of go, when that momentum in the overall market kind of simmers down a little bit. In my opinion, option activity isn't that great, especially for like the momentum type trading. It's good for some positioning and to understand like where people are picking their spots, maybe selling some puts into some things. But I find that option activity really helps when you're in a raging bull market. When you're not, yeah. So anyway, I think I already said that. But this was a nice trade, and maybe this arm gets going. I think it helps to look at this one on the weekly chart because it's really been going sideways for a while, but it's trying to get going. Right? Speaking of another name that's, I'm going to just kind of go around it to some different groups, but another one that's is trying to get going here, even though I still think there's this overhang of the deal with Core Z, but it is leaning higher and it's trying to get to that 150 VPOC up there. So not bad there. A few other names kind of came to life towards the end of the day. CLS, remember, CLS kind of looked like it was a little bit weak in here. Well, it's now right back to where it is to the top of the range. And let's see if this thing could break higher. CLS. Another one that I'm watching too is VRT. There was a story out earlier. Let's see if I can get that for you right now, which is basically Microsoft forecast show data center crunch persisting into 2026. Right? They're basically saying that that the crunch will continue longer for the companies previously outlined, with many U.S. data centers regions experiencing shortages of physical space and servers. So, this is kind of an interesting story because there's also some speculation outside of this that there could be, where are they going to basically put these data centers? How much water is going to be needed for some of these things? I find that very interesting. I actually see VRT moving up right now. I'm not sure what's going on, but speaking of which, and I don't think I'm driving that in this video, but VRT. So again, like, when you see a story like that, it kind of just reassures you. Like if you're thinking some of these trades are long in the tooth, when you hear something like that. Also, Elastic, I see, is getting a headline right now too. Um, Elastic, ELST, is probably, whoops, um, ESTC, sorry, is also getting a move too. So the momentum continues in some of these things. All right, so that's just a headline that's hitting the tape right now. As I get sidetracked, I want to also talk a little bit about the uranium names and the power generation names. Right, I think those are watches for tomorrow. Here's the 1 hour chart. UUUU. Why am I going to this one first? Well, because this one's acting the best right now out of the group. Right. And I know OKLO had a nice note out. I think it was from Canaccord. I did listen to the Canaccord analyst on CNBC. He was pretty good. But OKLO just, it got a street high price target up 2.5% of the day. So for no slouch. But I would watch this level right in here, which is 143. But again, UUUU right now, for use, has the momentum right now. Of course, another one that I like in this space is LEU. And I'm just watching since we've taken out that last VPOC up here. Well, we got another VPOC up here further. But I think right now it might be in a little bit of consolidation. All right, I'm going to get to the bad news in just a second. Two more stocks I'm going to go over. Palantir, so close to breaking out here. It did not close on the highs. I did take a position in this one towards the end of the day, but it did close above my level, 184.81. Now it just needs to follow through. Again, this has been a little bit more of a tougher one because some of these names have slowed down a little bit, and the price and the momentum has gone to other areas. Hood had some nice follow through today. Nice move up another 1% today. I got long a couple days ago on the test of the 5-day. Again, I was hoping that this would have a deeper pullback, but some of these names are just not providing that. All right, let's get to a little bit of the bad news for the day. I'm going to go over UUP. Right now, why is the dollar going up? Potentially bad news, right? Well, it's potentially bad news. It's kind of a headwind, right? And that could also have contributed to gold going down today. But notice that the dollar is now doing something like I've said a few times this year. I'm like, don't have to worry about the dollar in the UUP ETF unless it breaks 27.84. Now, this is a weekly bar, weekly candle. We have one more day to go, but it looks like this is going to close, unless we get a drop of about 0.7 of a percentage point in the dollar tomorrow. This looks like the dollar is starting to gear back up again. And I'm going to speak in very general terms here, right? When the dollar starts moving, it is generally a headwind for equities, right? Generally, it's not always. There's no 100% certainties in the market. But if this starts to really get going, maybe that will jostle people and concern people. Remember, the stock market, it's a confidence game, right? You start to break people's confidence, or you start to waver some of that confidence, right? People begin to take profits, right, in some things. So I would keep an eye on the dollar, because generally it is a headwind for companies, especially companies that have operations overseas, because they are paying a higher currency rate. Right? Was that right with the stronger dollar? Now, I think that's actually wrong. So let me take that last statement. But generally, U.S. products become more expensive. I think let me say this correctly. U.S. products become more expensive, right? So if international folks, folks outside U.S. borders are buying U.S. products, they become more expensive. All right, that's the right way to look at it. A couple other things too. This is from my note today. I'm also starting to watch breadth. Notice what happened here today. There was a lot for the second day in a row. We're seeing new lows pick up. Again, this is 4 weeks. This is not 52 weeks. So it's not, 1 year highs versus lows, but you're starting to see more lows. All right. Which means that there are some things going on beneath the surface that could be problematic if this continues. Now, 1 or 2 days is not a big deal where new lows are bigger than new highs. But if we start to see this trend, and so this is the second day that we've had it. What areas are showing some weakness? Well, a lot of consumer discretionary, a lot of things going on with housing right now. Right. So let's go back to the charts for a second. By the way, to get involved in this note, I also the breadth was particularly weak today. NYSE breadth at one point was like plus 25%. That's the lowest that I've seen going back a few months. Now it closed a little bit better than 25%, but still breadth was not particularly good today. So yeah, TTG. So you could see there's a on the bottom of the screen scrolling. That's where you can sign up for this note. I'm going to show just a couple other charts here of what's been going on with the home builders. Here's the weekly chart of the home builders. Notice they got to the top of the value area for the year and they stalled. Right. So this is telling us right now there's some problems going on. The housing market is getting a bit weaker. Again, you have to be careful because it's not so much interest rates that what the Fed controls, right? You got to watch what long-term interest rates are doing, right? The one other thing that I'm watching too is starting to watch credit spreads, right? We heard about this deal. What's the name of this thing? Sorry. As you can see, I'm not an expert on this. What's the private deal that went with Jeffrey's First Brands, right? So that's causing some people are starting to get a little bit concerned. So the last chart I'm going to show you is credit spreads, right? So this is what high yield is doing, right? So you have to kind of watch this in terms of not just what HYG is doing, but what overall the spread over treasuries is doing. If this starts to go up, like it does, this is what we did back in March and April, right? Spreads started to widen out a bit, and then they came right back in, right? And we're sitting here at low levels. If they start to really kind of crank up to this 155 level, then people are getting a little bit angst in the credit markets. Nothing right now. We're just coming off a low level, but this is another chart that I'm watching in addition to what the dollar is doing, in addition to what overall breadth is doing. All right, so those are some. So we are starting to get a little bit of concerns with this market, the good with the bad right now. Overall, no break in trends in any of the indices, but these are things to pay attention to. Guys, have a great night. See you tomorrow.